My mother's fingers pressed into my shoulders like she was presenting a prize at auction. The dining room erupted around me. Clinking glasses, perfume mixing with roasted meat, laughter bouncing off the chandelier. But the moment she opened her mouth, every sound collapsed into a single high-pitched tone, like someone had struck a tuning fork inside my skull. "This," she announced, her voice cutting through the noise, "is our daughter." She paused, let the anticipation build. I felt her nails through the thin fabric of my blouse, 5 points of pressure that would leave half-moon marks I'd find later in the mirror. Our family mistake. The laughter hit me in waves, not gasps, not uncomfortable silence, actual laughter rolling across the table like applause. Someone's phone lifted. A flash went off. My father pointed his fork in my direction and added, "She's the 1% we wish we could write off." More laughter. Tears wiped from eyes. Adults I'd known my entire life, holding crystal glasses my mother had spent hours polishing, finding it hilarious that a 17-year-old girl had just been called a mistake in her own home. The tuning fork in my head sharpened into something unbearable. I stared at the red wine ring someone had left near my plate, watching it blur as my vision tunneled. The tablecloth pattern. Tiny embroidered flowers my mother had special ordered from Italy. It seemed to pulse with each heartbeat I could feel throbbing in my temples. Every joke they'd ever made suddenly snapped into focus. The "what would we do without our little accident?" The "we weren't planning on you, but here you are." The way family friends tilted their heads and asked what my plan was like. Anything I said would be a punchline. The birthday cards that always mentioned how unexpected I'd been. The photo albums where my baby pictures took up half the space my brothers did. They'd been rehearsing for this moment for years. Tonight was just the premiere. My name is Nora. I'm 25 now. This is the story of how I turned their favorite joke into the thing that haunted them. I pushed my chair back, the legs scraped against hardwood, cutting through the laughter like a blade. The sound silenced the table for exactly 2 seconds. My mother's grip tightened. "Oh, come on, Liv. Don't be so sensitive. It's a joke." My father smirked over the rim of his glass. "You know we love you." As if love and public humiliation belonged in the same sentence. As if those words could erase what he'd just broadcast to 40 people who would remember this story forever. "I'm not laughing," I said. My voice came out steadier than I expected, steadier than the earthquake happening inside my chest. A few guests shifted. Someone coughed. No one spoke up. Not Aunt Diana, who'd watched me grow up. Not Mr. Hoffman, who'd told me I was talented at the church art show last spring. Not a single adult in that room thought to say that wasn't okay. I walked out of the dining room, past the foyer filled with framed photos where I was always slightly out of focus or positioned at the edge, up to my bedroom that had never felt like mine. The walls were a color my mother had chosen. The bedspread was a pattern she'd approved. Even my space had never really belonged to me. I didn't slam anything. I moved fast. Backpack, shirts, jeans, my sketchbook. The one thing in this house that was entirely mine. And $42 I'd been hiding in a shoebox for someday. Apparently, someday was tonight. When I came back downstairs, the noise had already resumed. The party had absorbed my exit like a stone dropped in water. A brief ripple, then nothing. I heard my mother's voice retelling it. "She's such a drama queen, you know how teenagers are," followed by sympathetic murmurs and someone refreshing their drink. I stepped into the doorway. Conversations faltered. Glasses paused midway to lips. I walked to the table, set my house key next to the expensive wine my mother had been bragging about, a bottle that cost more than my entire college savings, and looked directly at both of them. You're going to regret saying that out loud. No shouting, no tears, just a promise spoken clearly enough that the people closest to us would remember it. My mother's face twisted with annoyance. "Don't be ridiculous. Where do you think you're going to go?" My father was already reaching for the breadbasket, already dismissing me. "You'll cool off and be back by morning. We'll talk then." I turned, opened the front door, and stepped into the humid night air carrying a backpack, $42, and a label I refused to wear one more minute. I didn't know where I was going. I only knew I was done being the punchline that held their perfect story together. 8 years later, when they showed up broke, desperate, and red-eyed on my doorstep, I made sure they remembered every second of this walk. The bus station smelled like burned coffee and industrial cleaner. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everyone in the same sickly yellow. A woman slept across 3 plastic chairs. A man argued with the ticket clerk about a refund. Nobody looked twice at the teenage girl with the overstuffed backpack and the swollen eyes. I bought the farthest ticket my money could reach. New Orleans, one way, no plan. The clerk didn't ask questions, didn't even look up. On the overnight ride, my phone lit up with messages. My mother. Come back down and stop embarrassing us. My father. We'll talk in the morning, don't do anything stupid. A few relatives. They didn't mean it. You know how your parents joke. Not one person asked if I was okay. Not one person said, that was wrong. Not one person offered to come get me. I turned the phone off and pressed my forehead against the window, watching darkness slide past, wondering what I was, now that I wasn't willing to be their mistake anymore. Somewhere around 3 a.m., a woman across the aisle noticed me crying silently. She didn't ask questions, just handed me a pack of tissues and a granola bar from her purse. Whatever you're running from, she said quietly, I hope you find something better to run toward. I never got her name, but I kept that granola bar wrapper in my sketchbook for 3 years. New Orleans hit me all at once, heat like a wet blanket, horns and voices and music bleeding from open doors. It was chaos, but honest chaos. Nobody here was pretending to be perfect. Nobody cared who my parents were or what their revenue targets looked like. I found the cheapest hostel with a vacancy, paid for 3 nights, and stared at the ceiling fan wobbling overhead. 72 hours to figure out how not to sink. 72 hours before I'd be sleeping on the street. The first night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in that narrow bunk listening to strangers breathe and counted every mistake I'd ever made. Left home without a plan, left home without more money, left home thinking I could survive on stubbornness and a sketchbook full of drawings nobody had ever wanted to see. But then I thought about staying. About walking back into that dining room the next morning, pretending nothing happened, watching my parents tell the story at future parties, about spending the next year until graduation being the family joke who couldn't take a joke. The ceiling fan wobbled. I closed my eyes. I'd rather fail out here than succeed in there. The next morning, I walked until my feet blistered, chasing help wanted signs. Most places shook their heads. Need experience, not hiring minors, come back with a resume. One manager laughed when I admitted I'd never had a job. Another told me to come back when I looked more put together. By afternoon, hunger gnawed at my stomach, and my pride was running on fumes. My last $10 sat folded in my pocket, and I knew once I spent it, there was no backup, no parents to call, no safety net to catch me. I pushed open the door to a corner diner more out of desperation than hope. Cracked red booths, chrome stools, frying oil in the air. A guy my age slid past carrying 3 plates, calling out orders. Behind the counter, a woman in her 50s rang up customers with tired eyes and a coffee stain on her apron. Are you hiring? I asked. She looked me over. Cheap sneakers, the way I swayed from exhaustion, the backpack I hadn't set down because it was everything I owned. Her eyes softened just slightly. You ever wait tables? No, but I learned fast. I need work. I'll take any shift you've got. The guy with the plates glanced over. She's got that no backup plan energy. That's useful around here. The woman snorted. We pay minimum plus tips. It's not glamorous. Neither is the bus station, I said. For the first time in 24 hours, someone laughed with me instead of at me. She tossed me an apron. Name's Darlene. Start with clearing tables. If you survive lunch, we'll talk. I survived. Barely. I spilled 1 soda down my own shirt, mixed up 2 orders so badly a customer asked if I was new to the English language, and almost cried in the supply closet when someone snapped their fingers at me like I was a dog. But I also felt something I'd never felt at home. Every plate I carried mattered. Every tip I earned was mine. My effort translated directly into cash I could fold into my pocket, not into some vague idea of family pride that I could never live up to anyway. By the end of that first shift, my feet were screaming and my back ached in places I didn't know could ache. But I had $23 in tips and an offer to come back tomorrow. It was the richest I'd ever felt. The guy with the plates introduced himself during a lull. "I'm Marcus. So what did you run from?" "Who says I ran?" He raised an eyebrow. "You move like someone who's afraid standing still will get her killed. You flinch when Darlene raises her voice, even when she's yelling at the cook, and you keep checking the door like someone might walk in looking for you." He wasn't wrong about any of it. "Family stuff," I said finally. He nodded like that explained everything. "Yeah, me too." He didn't push, didn't pry, just handed me a rag and pointed to a table that needed wiping. Over the following weeks, the diner became my anchor. Mornings behind the counter, afternoons napping at the hostel, nights sketching in my notebook under dim light. I learned which regulars tipped well and which ones complained no matter what. I learned how to carry 4 plates at once and how to smile when I wanted to scream. On days off, I sat in a park drawing people's outfits. The linen of tourists, sharp blazers on businesswomen, the layered chaos of street performers. I sketched a trumpet player in a purple suit that didn't quite fit him and imagined how I'd remake it. I drew a woman in a sundress that made her look uncomfortable and redesigned it in my head until she looked powerful instead. Fabric was the only language that had ever made sense to me. It was the one place I could rewrite a body's story, give it armor where there had been exposed nerves. Every seam was a decision. Every cut was control. In a world where I'd never had any power, designing clothes made me feel like I could reshape reality itself. One night after closing, Marcus noticed my notebook peeking out of my bag. "You draw?" "I design." He flipped through the pages slowly, studying each one. Finally, he let out a low whistle. "These don't look like a mistake, Nora." The word mistake hit like a slap and a hug at once. I hadn't told him my parents' favorite label, but he'd stepped right on the bruise anyway. "Sorry," he said, reading my face. "Wrong word?" "It's fine." It wasn't, but I was learning that sometimes you had to pretend things were fine until they actually became fine. Darlene overheard from the kitchen. "Design? There's a community college nearby with a fashion program. My niece Shayla went. Got a job at a boutique downtown. You should look into it." College felt impossible. Money, applications, time. Those were things kids with safety nets worried about, not girls counting tips and crumpled bills. But that night, I borrowed the hostel computer and looked it up anyway. Tuition, deadlines, scholarship forms, requirements. It felt like staring up at a building with no elevator and being told to fly. But I remembered that woman on the bus. Whatever you're running from, I hope you find something better to run toward. I applied. I wrote an essay about growing up as the wrong puzzle piece in a picture-perfect family, about learning to see myself through their eyes and hating what I saw, about the night I decided I'd rather be nothing to them than be their nothing. I attached photos of my designs, the only proof I had that I could turn humiliation into something wearable. I hit submit with shaking fingers, then went to my shift like nothing had changed. Weeks later, an email arrived. I opened it in the break room, hands greasy from fries. "We are pleased to inform you." I read the sentence 3 times, then 4. Then I read the whole email out loud to myself just to make sure the words were real. I'd been accepted with enough financial aid that if I kept working, I could scrape by. Marcus whooped so loud, Darlene threatened to fire him. "You're in, Nora. You're actually doing it." That night, after the diner closed, they surprised me with a cupcake from the bakery next door, a single candle. Darlene and Marcus singing an off-key version of "For She's a Jolly Good Fellow." It was the first time anyone had ever celebrated me just for being me. College didn't fix anything magically. I still counted coins at the end of every week. I still shared a room with strangers and ate ramen more often than real meals. But for the first time, I wasn't just running from the house where they'd branded me a mistake. I was running toward a life that had room for all the parts of me they'd never bothered to see. The fashion program was a pressure cooker. Half my classmates had private sewing lessons growing up and parents who funded their creative journeys. They talked casually about summer internships in Milan and fabric shopping trips to Tokyo. I had sketches done between shifts and fabric scraps begged from clearance bins. I learned to nod along when they discussed things I couldn't afford and changed the subject when they asked where I came from. On critique day, I pinned a deconstructed blazer to the wall, seams exposed on purpose, my attempt to visualize what it felt like sitting at the edge of a family that never fully claimed me. The lining was visible. The stitches showed. Everything usually hidden was on display. The professor studied it, walked around it, touched the fabric. "Pretty," she said at last. "But safe. It looks like you pulled back right when it was getting interesting. Were you afraid to offend someone?" The class chuckled. A guy in the front row smirked. Safe? Afraid? Offend? She had no idea how accurately she'd named the life I'd been handed. 17 years of making myself smaller so nobody would notice me. 17 years of pulling back right when things got interesting because interesting meant attention, and attention meant becoming a target. That night, I dreamed I was back at the dining table, my designs taped to the walls. My mother clinked her glass. "This is our daughter, our second mistake." My father pointed at my work. 1% talent, 99% disappointment. The guests laughed. Someone took a picture. I woke with my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The next day, I spread my sketches across a cafeteria table, half tempted to tear them up. Every design suddenly looked timid. Every choice felt like compromise. Tessa dropped into the chair opposite me. Dark curls, red lipstick, always carrying a sketchbook and a coffee cup that looked like it had been refilled 4 times. "You look like you're about to murder that paper. My professor thinks my designs are safe." She flipped through a few pages, taking her time. Finally, she looked up. "She's wrong. These aren't safe. They're furious. You've got anger sewn into every seam. You just keep covering it with pretty details because you're scared someone will flinch." She tapped a sketch of a dress I'd designed. "This one. See how the cut makes it look like wings? But then you added all this decorative stitching that weighs it down, like you gave it the ability to fly and then clipped its feathers." I stared at the drawing. She was right. I'd been sabotaging my own work. "Stop sanding the edges down," she said. "If they flinch, good. That means you made them feel something." Between Tessa at school and Marcus at the diner, I finally had something like a support system. Marcus asked to see every new sketch and always found something to compliment. Tessa dragged me to gallery shows and kept repeating one line: "Art that makes people comfortable rarely changes anything." Slowly, I started listening. Mid-semester, the department announced a citywide design competition sponsored by a big-name fashion house. Cash prize, internship, press coverage. The entry required a small collection around a theme. My classmates buzzed about trends, pastels, sustainability, cottagecore. Everyone scrambling to guess what the judges wanted to see. I went home and stared at a blank page. I knew what my theme really was, but saying it felt dangerous. What it means to be told you're a mistake and live anyway. For 3 days, I didn't sketch anything. I'd pick up my pencil, then put it down. The words my mother had spoken kept echoing in my head, but now they weren't paralyzing me. They were demanding to be used. Eventually, I stopped pretending and leaned in. I sketched jackets that looked like armor with deliberate scars of stitching where other designers would hide seams. Dresses cut to move like someone walking away from a house on fire. A suit that seemed clean from the outside but hid text embroidered inside the lining where only the wearer would feel it. Every piece told a story. The blazer with the exposed seams was called Inheritance. The dress with the asymmetrical hemline was Departure. The coat with the hidden pockets deep enough to hold everything you owned was $42. I broke needles, remade pieces 3, 4, 5 times, juggled shifts at the diner, skipped sleep, drank so much coffee my hands shook. Tessa stopped by my apartment at 2 a.m. once and found me crying over a zipper that wouldn't cooperate. She didn't say anything, just helped me rip it out and start over. The last piece I finished was a black blazer. Inside the jacket, in metallic thread where no one on the outside could see, I stitched 3 words. Not your mistake. When I knotted the final thread, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. A month after submission, while I was rethreading a machine in the studio, my phone lit up with a number from my hometown area code. I almost let it ring out. That area code meant nothing good. "Hello?" A pause. Then a voice I hadn't heard in years, deeper now but unmistakable. "Nora?" My chest tightened. Bennett, my younger brother. The kid they'd wrapped in bubble wrap while I took the hits. "Got your number from Aunt Diana," he said. Aunt Diana was the only relative I'd stayed in occasional contact with over the years. A birthday text here, a holiday card there. Just enough that she'd been able to pass along my number when Bennett asked. His voice sounded rough, tired. "I know we haven't talked. I know you probably don't want to hear from me. But it's bad, Nora. Really bad." "What's going on?" "Mom and Dad, they've really messed up. The business is gone. Not struggling, gone. Debts everywhere. The bank's coming for the house. People they used to show off for won't even return their calls anymore." I sank onto a stool, staring at the fabric in my hands. For a long moment, I didn't say anything. "What does that have to do with me?" He hesitated. "They need help. Real help. And you're doing well, right? College, that design thing. People send me your work. You're the one everyone's proud of now." The irony was so sharp I almost laughed. The family mistake had become the functional adult, while the golden parents drowned in their own choices. "They're begging you to come home," Bennett said quietly. "They said they were wrong about you, that they should have treated you better. They think maybe you can help them figure this out. Now they think I'm capable of figuring things out?" I know how it sounds." He paused. "Will you at least come hear them out? Please? I don't know what to do here, and you're the only one who ever actually knew how to handle things." Silence stretched between us. I looked at the black blazer hanging from the rack, the metallic words hidden inside the lining. Not your mistake. For the first time, the label they'd given me wasn't the one that mattered. Something colder settled underneath the old hurt. The knowledge that this time, I held the power. The question was what I was going to do with it. I didn't answer Bennett immediately. Instead, I spent 2 days thinking it over, talking it through with Tessa and Marcus, weighing whether going back would undo everything I'd built or finally put it to rest. In the end, I decided I needed to see it for myself. I drove back like I was heading to a crime scene. The closer I got, the more the scenery looked the same. Gas stations, strip malls, the faded welcome billboard that still said, "A great place to call home." But my chest kept tightening with every familiar mile marker. I parked a block away and walked the rest, giving myself one last chance to turn around. The house that had been the backdrop of every perfect family photo looked smaller. Lawn overgrown with weeds my father would have fired a landscaper over 5 years ago. Paint peeling from the porch railing. A foreclosure notice taped crookedly to the front door like a final review. For years, this place had been their favorite prop. The stage where they performed success for an audience of admiring neighbors. Now it looked like a set nobody bothered to strike after the show closed. I rang the bell. My mother opened the door. For a second, we just stared. Gretchen had always been meticulous. Hair blown out, makeup done before she took the trash out. I'd never seen her leave her bedroom without looking presentable. Now her hair was scraped back in a messy ponytail, mascara smudged under red-rimmed eyes, wearing a sweater with a stain on the sleeve. "Nora," she breathed, like my name might break. "Hi, Mom." The word felt strange in my mouth, foreign, like a language I'd stopped speaking years ago. She stepped aside. The house smelled stale. No citrus candles, no expensive food, no fresh flowers in the entryway vase. Piles of unopened mail cluttered the console table. Dust on surfaces my mother would have fired a housekeeper over. A framed photo from that milestone dinner still sat on a shelf. I was in it, blurred in the background, half turned away. Even in their display of family unity, I'd been an afterthought. My father stood in the living room, thinner, tie loosened, shoulders slumped like they couldn't bear their own weight anymore. Victor had always filled space. Big voice, big presence. The kind of man who walked into rooms expecting applause. Now he looked like the room was swallowing him. "You came," he said, as if he hadn't expected it. "You asked. I was curious what the end of the world looks like from your side." We sat in the room where I'd once been lectured about gratitude, about appreciating everything they did for me, about how I'd never understand sacrifice until I had kids of my own. Bennett leaned against the doorway, looking older and more tired than a 21-year-old should. He'd been 13 when I left, too young to understand, too wrapped up in his own golden child status to notice what was happening to his sister. "So," I said, "what happened?" The story spilled out like a dam breaking. Bad investments dressed as opportunities, loans taken to cover previous loans, money shuffled to keep up the illusion. My father's company had been bleeding for years, but instead of scaling back, they doubled down. Extended credit lines, second mortgages, business decisions made to impress people at parties instead of to actually run a business. "We thought we could fix it before anyone noticed," my mother said, twisting a tissue until it shredded. "We always fix things." "You hid it. From everyone, including me. We didn't want you to worry." "You had no problem letting me worry about whether I even belonged in this family. But sure, protect me from the bank statements." My mother's eyes filled. "We made mistakes," she whispered. "You didn't make mistakes. You branded me as one. You turned me into a joke you could tell over dessert." My father rubbed his forehead. "We were joking, Nora. That night got out of hand, but we never meant." "You meant it enough to say it. You meant it enough that people still quote you." His head snapped up. "What do you mean, still?" I shrugged. "Someone filmed you calling me the family mistake. It's online, has been for years. People I've never met have watched you laugh at your own kid." My mother's hand flew to her mouth. "That was a private dinner." "Nothing's private when you perform cruelty for an audience." Bennett stared at the carpet. "I saw it. About a year ago. I told myself it had to be edited or something. I didn't want to believe it was real." "It was real," I said. "And now you want something from me. So say it plainly." My father straightened, trying to summon some of his old authority. "We're going to lose the house. The business is finished. We remortgaged everything. Your college fund." He broke off. I already knew, but I wanted to hear him admit it. "My college fund. What about it?" "We used it. Thought we could pay it back before you needed it. We were wrong. Then you left, and we assumed you wouldn't." He trailed off. "Wouldn't become anything?" I finished. He didn't deny it. My mother reached for my hand, then stopped. "We're not asking for a handout. We just need a bridge, someone to help us get back on our feet. You're successful now. People talk about your designs. You could help us restructure, maybe lend." "So now I'm useful," I said. "Now that the golden facade cracked, suddenly the family mistake looks like an asset." "It's not like that." "It's exactly like that. 8 years ago, you asked what you'd do without me and laughed. Now you're finding out." My father's composure slipped. "We're scared, Nora. We're going to lose everything." I looked around at the expensive furniture they couldn't sell fast enough, the heavy curtains, the framed certificates with their names in gold, everything they'd worshipped, everything they'd chosen over treating me like a person. "You're wrong," I said quietly. "You're not going to lose everything. You already did. You lost me." The words hung there. My mother sobbed. Bennett swallowed hard. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the smallest person in the room. The next day, I came back with a notebook full of numbers. If I was going to decide anything, I needed facts, not just the satisfaction of watching them squirm. We spread bank statements across the same dining table where they'd passed dessert and insults. The table looked better buried in truth. Their situation was worse than I'd thought. Multiple mortgages, maxed cards, personal guarantees on loans gone bad. One line made my jaw tighten. Education fund liquidated. "That was supposed to be mine," I said. My father didn't sugarcoat it. "We thought the next quarter would turn things around. When it didn't, we kept moving money. We told ourselves we'd fix it before it mattered." My mother added, "You've always been resourceful. We knew you'd land on your feet." As if robbing me had been a compliment, as if stealing my future was a vote of confidence. The doorbell rang before I could respond. Tessa stood on the porch, metal earrings catching the light. She'd been my classmate in an early design elective, the one who'd joked, "If my parents called me a mistake, I'd put it on a t-shirt and retire." I'd texted her the night before that I was heading to my parents' place, and we'd shared locations on our phones for years, a safety habit we'd started after late nights in the design studio. "You ghost my texts, your location disappears, then pops up here?" She raised an eyebrow. Figured either you'd been kidnapped or you finally came to see the people who broke you. Option 2, come in. My mother appeared, dish towel in hand. We're in the middle of a family discussion. This is private. Tessa tilted her head. Is it? She pulled out her phone, tapped, and turned the screen toward my parents. The video played, my mother's voice over clinking cutlery. This is our daughter, the family mistake. My father's follow-up, the roar of laughter. Underneath, thousands of comments calling them exactly what they were. My mother's face went gray. She reached for the back of a chair to steady herself. Where did you get that? My father demanded. It's everywhere. One of your dinner guests posted it to social media a few years back. Thought it was funny, I guess. It got picked up, shared, remixed, forums, reaction videos. Can you believe these people compilations? Someone made a whole thread about what kind of parents do this. You're a cautionary tale. 3 million views and counting. His anger snapped free. People don't know the context. They don't know our family. One clip and suddenly we're monsters. I stepped between him and Tessa. You gave them the clip. That was you without filters. You thought no one outside this room would ever see it. You were wrong. My mother sank into a chair. We never meant for it to hurt you like this. It was just a joke. Tessa cut in. Funny how the people laughing are never the punchline. She looked at me. You okay? It was the only time anyone in this house had asked me that without an agenda attached. Bennett stared at the table. I didn't know it was that bad, the video. I knew things were tense, but I didn't know. You were a kid, I said. They were the adults. They made choices. I turned back to my parents. Here's the problem. You talk about this like you made mistakes and everything else was fine. But this, I gestured at the phone, this is who you are when you're comfortable. You turned your own kid into entertainment. You drained my college fund to keep the show going, and now you want me to help you rebuild the stage. My father's shoulders dropped. You're right. So what happens now? Do you walk away and let the internet finish us? He was finally saying the quiet part out loud, more afraid of humiliation than losing the house, more worried about reputation than relationship. For a heartbeat, I pictured it. Laying everything out publicly, interviews, headlines, their faces plastered under the word abusive. I could make them famous for all the wrong reasons. It would feel good, and then it would be over. They'd still find ways to make themselves victims in their own story. They'd tell everyone I'd abandoned them in their time of need. The internet would move on to the next outrage, and nothing would really change. That would be too simple, I said. If I help you at all, it won't be to restore what you had. That version of your life is dead. What we're talking about now is whether you're willing to live with accountability, the kind you were happy to dodge when you were on top. Before we talk numbers, I laid out terms, not financial, personal. You stop acting like I owe you my life because you fed me and kept a roof over my head. That's the minimum for having a kid, not a debt I have to repay. My mother flinched. We never. You reminded me every time I didn't perform the way you wanted, after everything we do for you, you don't know how good you have it. You turned my existence into something I was supposed to apologize for. My father's jaw tightened. Fine. You want us to admit we handled things badly. We did. No, I want you to understand there are consequences. If I help, it's not a rescue. It's a contract. You get survival, not status. You sell what you can, move somewhere smaller, get regular jobs, no more show. My mother stared. What kind of jobs? The kind most people work. Retail, office, whatever you can get without lying on the application. My father's mouth twisted. So we're supposed to accept being nobodies after everything we built? You're not nobodies. You're people living at your real size instead of the inflated version you performed. That's not punishment. That's reality. Tessa let out a quiet yep from the corner. I pulled a folded document from my bag. This is a draft agreement. Basic terms. I'm not handing over money on a promise. If we go forward, it's in writing. My father picked it up, scanning clauses about limited support, sale of assets, public statements, therapy, boundaries about contact. One clause specifically addressed restitution for the college fund they'd taken, structured repayment once they were stable, even if it took years. His eyebrows rose with each section. You came prepared. I always was someone. You just didn't like the version that didn't make you look good. He let the papers fall. If we sign this and keep our side, do you think you'll ever forgive us? My mother held her breath. I thought about the girl with the backpack and $42, about sewing until my fingers cramped because I refused to be what they'd named me, about every night I'd spent wondering if maybe they were right about me. Forgiveness isn't a payment plan. You might get it someday. You might not. Either way, you don't get to use it as a bargaining chip. What you get, if you're lucky, is a chance to be better people than you've been. What you've already lost is the right to script my role in your story. They signed. The fallout came fast. Foreclosure, cars sold, the vacation timeshare gone with a few strokes of a pen. They left the neighborhood they'd treated like a stage and moved into a small rental on the edge of town, the kind of place they used to describe as where people who don't plan ahead end up. Now they were those people. I kept my side of the agreement, paid enough debt to keep them out of court, hired a financial counselor, then stepped back. They had to make the hard calls themselves, canceling services, taking whatever work they could get, learning what groceries actually cost when you aren't throwing parties. The public apology happened in a community center that smelled faintly of bleach. A few dozen locals showed up. More watched online. I streamed it from my apartment in New Orleans, the black blazer hanging behind me like a shadow. My mother spoke first. Years ago, I called my own daughter the family mistake. I thought I was being clever. I was being cruel. She looked at the camera. Nora, I'm sorry. Not just for that night, but for every time I used you as a joke. My father followed, admitting he'd made me the punchline of their success story and treated my feelings like acceptable collateral damage. The chat filled with people doubting them, praising them, dragging them. That noise wasn't mine to manage. The apology was their starting line, not my closure. While their lives shrank, mine grew. The collection I'd submitted won second place, enough money to breathe and an internship I leveraged into something better. Over the following 2 years, I built on that momentum. The internship led to freelance work, the freelance work led to press coverage, and the press coverage attracted an investor who believed in my vision. With visibility from the contest, that investment, and everything I'd saved, I launched a small brand built around what had kept me upright. Sharp lines, visible seams, hidden messages for the wearer. I called the first collection 1%. Marcus had left the diner by then. Darlene had sold it to retire, and he'd discovered he had a talent for operations. He handled logistics for the brand, and it turned out running a diner kitchen really does teach you a lot about supply chains. Tessa handled branding and made our Instagram look like an art gallery. Meanwhile, my parents clocked into jobs with name tags. My mother folded clothes at a mid-range department store. My father processed paperwork in a small insurance office. Their old circle quietly stopped inviting them anywhere. They weren't pariahs. They were invisible. For people who'd built their entire identity on being impressive, that was a slow, steady punishment. The twist came a year later when the bank moved to auction the house. I flew in, sat at the back of the room, and raised my paddle at the right moment. The house sold for a fraction of what my parents once bragged it was worth. Between my savings, brand profits, and a small business loan, I had just enough. The deed ended up in my name. You said you wouldn't save the house, my father said when I told them. I didn't. I bought a building. What it's for now is my choice. We stripped it. The dining room where they'd humiliated me became an open studio space. Upstairs bedrooms turned into classrooms and workrooms. Using prize money and brand profits, I opened a nonprofit there. Sewing classes, portfolio help, small grants for kids who'd been written off as problems, wastes, mistakes, the ones teachers gave up on, the ones whose parents told them they'd never amount to anything. On the front door, in clean metal letters, we mounted a sign. The Not a Mistake Project. Underneath, smaller text. For anyone who was ever told they were the problem, the first time my parents visited, they stood on the sidewalk staring at the sign for a full minute without speaking. Inside, the place was unrecognizable. Mismatched chairs, mood boards on walls covered in fabric swatches, and magazine clippings, teenagers in thrifted clothes arguing about color palettes and seam allowances. My mother paused in what used to be my bedroom, now lined with sewing machines, a girl with purple hair hunched over a jacket, tongue sticking out in concentration. A boy in the corner was learning to thread a bobbin, cursing under his breath when the thread tangled. "Do they know everything?" my mother asked quietly. "They know enough. They don't need my worst memories to benefit from my best choices." In the former dining room, I'd left one thing, the old light fixture overhead. No long table, no head seat, just a circle of chairs and a whiteboard covered in ideas. That light had shone down on the worst moment of my life. Now it lit up the best thing I'd ever built. My father looked around. "You really erased us." "I outgrew you. There's a difference." He swallowed. "We're trying. Therapy, work, no more jokes like that." "Good. That's about who you are now. This place isn't about you at all." One of the students, a 16-year-old named Destiny who reminded me of myself at that age, came up and asked me to check her stitching on a skirt she'd designed. I excused myself and went to help her, leaving my parents standing in the space that used to belong to them. They watched me teach, show her how to fix a puckered seam, praise her color choices, tell her that her instincts were right, that she should trust herself. When I looked up, my mother was crying. We're not some neatly heeled family. Some holidays I answer their calls, some I don't. They live in a small apartment now. Budget carefully. Watch for sales. Clip coupons for the first time in their lives. That's their life. They built it brick by brick. Bennett and I talk more often now. Monthly phone calls, the occasional visit when I'm in town. He's apologized for not seeing what was happening when we were kids, and I've told him what I told myself years ago. He was a child, and the adults failed both of us in different ways. We're not close the way siblings who grew up trusting each other are close, but we're building something real. He volunteers at the nonprofit sometimes, teaching basic business skills to the older students. Mine is loud and real. I spend my days fitting jackets on kids who thought they'd never put their name on anything worth keeping. My nights sketching new ways to turn ugly words into armor. Last month, Destiny got into a fashion program, the same one I went to, full scholarship. When I told her, she cried and said, "I never thought anyone would see me as anything but trouble." I hugged her and said, "The people who couldn't see you were wrong. That was their failure, not yours." Sometimes when I lock up the old house, I run my fingers over the metal letters on the door and remember the scrape of my chair against the floor the night I walked out, the look on their faces when I said I wasn't laughing, the $42 in my backpack, and the belief that anywhere was better than there. People say revenge is about destroying the people who hurt you. For me, it was about destroying the version of myself who still needed their approval and building something they couldn't enter on their own terms. So I'll leave you with the question that still lives at the edge of my thoughts. If the people who broke you showed up years later, crying and begging you to save them, would you open the door? And if you did, whose rules would you finally live by? Before you go, here's a quick bonus for sticking around. If you love learning and growing like I do, you need to try audiobooks. I've got an exclusive deal with Audible. Your first month is completely free. That's access to over 500,000 titles, zero cost to you. All the details are waiting in the description. Don't miss this one.